Autistic people care too much, research says in a journal article of neuroscience was released last week regarding morality and individual gain, comparing groups of autistic people and non-autistic people. The participants were from Brazil and age range was 14 to 25 years old. Socioeconomic status wasn't considered. Participants had to either accept or refuse these two different conditions. They could accept or refuse to fund a good cause at the expense of their own funds, a charity supporting education for children and teens, or they could accept or refuse to support a bad cause in exchange for individual monetary benefit, an organization that wants to clean the street by exterminating street animals. The researchers had participants choose this in two different settings, a private setting or a public one. Autistic individuals were much more likely than the non-autistic group to refuse the second choice, which is to refuse to support the bad cause to gain money for themselves. However, neurotypical people often accepted the second bad condition in the private setting, but not the public one. Autistic people did not differ in their actions between private and public settings. This was the main difference between groups in the task. Under the private setting, autistic participants refused to support the bad cause significantly more than the neurotypical participants. Neurotypicals more selfish when there's more to gain. Figure 2 of the paper shows the percentage of moral choice between groups and settings. During the experiment, the participants would see different amounts of individual gain loss, different amounts of gain for the cause they are supporting during each trial. When I look at the private bad cause condition, I can see that NT participants are less likely to refuse to support the bad cause when they have more to gain. Whereas I do not see this pattern in the autistic group. In fact, the autistic group refuses more often overall in the bad condition compared to the neurotypical group, regardless of setting. Using computational modeling, the authors suggest that the autistic participants overevaluate the negative consequences of their actions, which is why they refuse to support the bad cause in both settings. In my personal opinion, as an autistic person, I would argue that the non-autistic participants underestimate the negative consequences of their actions and simply chose individual benefit over principles. fMRI analysis. And the author's representational similarity analysis based on the participants' fMRI data, they found reduced right temporoparietal junction (RTPJ) representation in the autistic participant compared to non-autistic participants, and argue that this reduction may somehow mediate this over-evaluation of negative consequences in autistic people. The RTPJ has been commonly investigated in autistic participants, mostly children, is thought by some researchers to be used in theory of mind tests. However, more recent literature has shown that autistic people do not have worse theory of mind than neurotypicals, but simply interact differently, pathologizing positive human traits because of autism. The authors pathologized autistic participants for refusing to support a bad cause, essentially for not being as selfish as the non-autistic group. Here we showed that ASD individuals are more inflexible when following a moral rule, even though an immoral action can benefit themselves and suffer an undue concern about their ill-gotten gains and the moral cost. Let's break this down. Autistic participants are less likely to take an immoral action, even though it can benefit themselves. That sounds like a good thing. That sounds like those participants have integrity. Then they specified that they suffer an undue concern, as if our concerns about immorality are unnecessary or unimportant, about their ill-gotten gains and the moral costs, about money that was obtained through means that didn't align with their actual principles, and the weight of that decision. So what they concluded was autistic people care too much about their morals and too little about themselves. Reframing. But to reframe this, on average, autistic people are more likely to be selfless and to show integrity in their moral values than neurotypicals. Autistic people are less likely to change their moral values based on their own individual gain, even when that individual gain was large. And just to extrapolate that further, autistic people cared more about their values than themselves, whereas this was not clearly shown in neurotypicals. So what they said originally, what they concluded was essentially this: autistic people care too much about their morals and too little about themselves. Pathologizing language harms. Here are some phrases that are used within this research article. Healthy group is used when referring to the neurotypicals. ASD patients when referring to the autistics. The term atypical moral behaviors when referring to autistic people. A core deficit in theory of mind ability is part of being autistic. The difference between groups is a dysfunction in the RTPJ for autistic people. Real world implications autistic employment and poverty. Unfortunately, sticking to your morals in a capitalist society doesn't often gain you monetary benefit. This means less opportunities for autistic people and high rates of poverty and homelessness. This can be seen in autistic people's stances against ABA, for example, which decreases speaking opportunities for autistic advocates. It's harder for us to keep and find jobs because we often speak up if roles are broken or people in a company are trying to cut corners. Many of us think about the ethical consequence of our action, even if it doesn't affect us. Here's one autistic person's experience with keeping their job and the difficulty with having uncompromising morals. Honestly, what makes me angriest about this is that I know for a fact it's a large barrier for employment to me than my social skills. A lot of customer service is scripted, and I'm really good at that. But I can't sacrifice my ethics day in, day out. Autistic versus the control group are much more likely to reject the opportunity to earn ill-gotten money by supporting a bad cause. Interpreted as autistic deficits, failure to consider social reputation, inflexibility, oversensitivity to immoral actions. It's a stark example of the social model of disability under capitalism. The inability to do things I know are wrong is a deficit to my ability to survive. Being high-functioning, analytical enough to understand second, third-order consequences of actions makes this worse. Further, another autistic person can't take a variety of jobs because of the harm these jobs cause. But I can't take a job where my work will cause harm. I can't cancel someone's insurance benefits or tell someone they don't deserve housing because they don't have the credit. I can't watch my boss steal tips. I can't work for a company that I know uses sweatshops or prison labor. Non-autistics reading this may think I mean I don't want to do these jobs, but I genuinely cannot. Can't let that stuff slide. Even if I try, believe me, I've tried. My brain and body shut down on me. Panic, I lash out the system, or I get fired, or I quit. Meanwhile, so many companies are commodifying our neurotype because of how efficient autistic employees are. This means that often autistic people must compete amongst themselves for even fewer employee positions in these autism at work programs, leaving many qualified candidates to fend for themselves. Most positions involve data analysis, IT jobs, or other tech jobs, again leaving out a huge proportion of autistic people who don't have that specific background. In conclusion, just to be clear, this is one paper. Not every autistic person is selfless. Not every neurotypical person is selfish. However, when researchers twist common positive human traits into autistic deficit, such as inflexible and overly sensitive to morals, it hurts everyone. Autistic people don't care too much. They care correctly. Many autistic people have immense integrity. It's okay to acknowledge that. In fact, it's imperative that we acknowledge that. The actual research done in this study is somewhat interesting and could have implications for autistic adults, especially regarding employment, socioeconomic status, and homelessness. The researchers were just too busy pathologizing autism to notice. In closing, here's a succinct summary of this research by another autistic. The way to interpret this is that neurotypicals compulsively assign unwarranted value to social constructs because of a need to conform, while atypical minds recognize that there is no actual benefit in doing so. Autistics versus others were much more likely to reject the opportunity to earn ill-gotten money by supporting a bad cause